Late at night, I was lying on my husband's arm and scrolling through my WeChat moments. A high school classmate whom I hadn't been in touch with for years posted a wedding photo. After a 7-year relationship, we finally achieved our happy ending. I quickly liked it and replied, "Congratulations. Wish you a long and happy marriage." When I clicked on the attached picture, I was shocked to find that the man in the photo was actually my husband. I kicked my sleeping husband awake and threw my phone at him. "What's going on? Why didn't I know you had a twin brother?" Blaze was half asleep and replied instinctively, "I'm the only child in my family. Where would I get a twin brother?" However, when he saw the photo on the phone clearly, he was instantly stunned. "Why do you have her as a friend?" I had been eagerly waiting for his explanation and comfort, but when I heard this sentence, my heart skipped a beat. The siren in the photo was no longer the chubby girl she used to be. Her emaciated body was like a skeleton covered with human skin. If it were for the clear remark "siren" on the contact, I could hardly have associated the person in the photo with the girl I remembered. But Blaze's first reaction wasn't to ask me who this person was. Instead, he asked why I had her as a friend. I suppressed the unease in my heart. Is it so strange that I have sirens we chat? After all, she was my high school classmate. Explain it clearly. Since you don't have a brother, then what's going on with this photo? Blaze seemed to realize something and quickly explained. "Honey, don't be angry. I just woke up and was a bit surprised to see this name. Why are you still in touch with her? Besides, there are many people who look alike in the world. This obviously isn't me. Your husband is much more handsome than the guy in the photo. Don't think too much. Go to bed early. We have to go back to our hometown tomorrow morning." After saying that, he turned over and was about to go back to sleep. However, the phone placed on the bedside table suddenly rang a few times. Blaze picked up the phone and looked at the message. His face clearly showed some panic. "Honey, there's a problem at the company. I need to rush back and deal with it right away. You go to bed early." Before I could say anything, he had already put on his clothes, taken his phone, and left in a hurry. I looked at his flustered back, and my heart gradually sank. Just now, I clearly saw the name Siren flash across his phone screen. Siren was my high school classmate. Due to her family's poverty, average looks, and poor academic performance, she was bullied by many people at school. At that time, Blaze and I were just a young couple in love. When we were secretly kissing in a secluded place, we happened to see Siren cornered by a group of girls. Her chubby body curled up into a ball, and her cheeks were already swollen and red from being slapped. I couldn't bear to see it, so I asked Blaze to go over and drive away those girls who were bullying her. The way Siren looked at us at that moment was like a person walking in the dark suddenly seeing the light, with a dazzling glow in her eyes. But as we left, that light gradually faded and disappeared. Out of compassion, I often ragged Blaze to talk to her and even discuss our studies. At that time, Blaze and I were the popular figures in school, always ranking first and second in the grade. We were the most promising students in the eyes of teachers and school directors, and also the people that many students wanted to curry favor with. As Blaze and I visited her more often, the bullying gradually decreased until it finally disappeared completely, and Siren became our little follower as a result. No matter where Blaze and I went, she would always suddenly appear out of the blue and follow us at a short distance. Every time, Blaze would curse at her and tell her to go away. But in the end, he would tolerate it under my disapproving gaze. Blaze even joked half seriously, "Aren't you afraid that Siren has some feelings for me and will steal me away?" At that time, I was confident and proud. "Then you can go. I will definitely give you my wholehearted blessings." It wasn't until the eve of the college entrance examination that I accidentally witnessed Siren confessing her love to Blaze that I understood what he meant by that sentence. Blaze refused her without hesitation and pulled me over. "With such a beautiful wife like Aurora, I'd have to be blind to agree to you." Siren ran away crying. Since then, I never saw her again. Later, I heard from my classmates that she didn't take the college entrance examination that year and was forcibly taken back to her hometown by her parents. If it weren't for the last class reunion, where someone pushed Siren's WeChat to me, I might have thought that I would never have any contact with her again in my life. I opened that wedding photo again. The groom, Hein Sai, dressed in a black suit, stood behind the bride, putting his arms around her. The two of them looked at the camera together, smiling brightly. From any angle, this man had the exact same face as Blaise. Suddenly, my gaze landed on the groom's wristwatch. There was a prominent red scratch on the black strap. It was exactly the same as the one Blaise had left on the bedside table. After confirming that the man in the photo was Blaise, I could no longer stay calm. When did he get back in touch with Siren? And when did they start their relationship? Or had they never lost contact from the very beginning? Moreover, Blaise had already registered our marriage with me. Why was he able to take a wedding photo with Siren? Bigamy? Marriage fraud? How many things was he still hiding from me? Countless speculations and thoughts were crashing around in my mind. The feeling of my trust being brutally torn apart made me doubt everything in the past. I couldn't hold back the unease in my heart any longer and immediately turned on the location function on my phone. When we just graduated, Blaise had a lot of social engagements. To make me feel at ease, he specially installed a location tracking app on his phone. At that time, he had solemnly promised, "Honey, you will always be the only one for me. And I will never lie to you. As long as you want. No matter where I am. You can check up on me at any time." Out of trust in him and the 10-year relationship between us, I had never used this function before. I never expected that the first time I used it would be to find evidence of his infidelity. The red dot on the map, after leaving the residential area, drove all the way from the south of the city to the north, crossing two districts before finally stopping. Obviously, it was very far from the address of his company. Without saying a word, I put on my clothes and went out to take a taxi. Soon, when out a sorry, I arrived at the Xingfu residential area shown on the map. Because the residential area was too old and didn't have an underground garage, I saw Blaise's car at a glance. Looking up along the car, and the residential building next to it, only the lights in the apartment on the 4th floor were still on. Two figures were faintly visible by the window. A man and a woman. The woman was petite and thin. The man was tall and looked like Blaise. I took out my phone and was about to call Blaise to make a final confirmation. At this moment, my phone suddenly received a text message, "Don't alert the enemy. If you agree to my conditions, I will help you take revenge on this cheating man and a woman with loose morals." What do you think? My heart skipped a beat. And I immediately looked around warily. But all I could see was darkness. In the silent residential area, except for a few scattered lights, there were no other people in sight. I tried to calm myself down and typed a message. "Who are you? It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that I can help you. Help me?" I looked up at the 4th floor. The dim light had already gone out. The dark window was like a grinning monster, mercilessly mocking me. It was the middle of the night. And there was a man and a woman alone together. Any adult would understand what that meant. Just thinking that the man I had loved for 10 years was now being affectionate with another woman made my heart feel as if it was being clenched tightly. The pain was so intense that I could hardly breathe. At the same time, there was a nauseating feeling welling up from my stomach to my chest, almost breaking through my throat. I tightly pinched my palm, trying to suppress the feeling of nausea that made my throat itch. "What are your conditions?" But the other person seemed to have disappeared. No matter how many text messages I sent or how many calls I made, there was no response on the other end. I looked up at the 4th floor again and then turned around and left without hesitation. When Blaise came back, it was already early the next morning. He came in with the chill from outside. When he saw me curled up on the sofa, he was clearly taken aback. "You're up so early?" I looked up at him, trying to find a trace of guilt on his face. But I couldn't tell whether Blaise was hiding his feelings too well or he didn't think there was anything wrong with staying out all night. He calmly placed the breakfast in his hand on the dining table and smiled. "Do you still remember the xiaolong bao from this place? You used to love eating them the most. You ate them for several months in a row. I almost threw up from eating them so much. But you never got tired of them. I queued up early this morning to buy them specially. Come on. Eat them while they're still hot." My gaze landed on the Xiaolongbao, and a flood of memories came rushing back. When Blaze had a job transfer, I decisively quit my promising job and accompanied him to this strange city. Because I wasn't used to the local food, I lost 15 pounds in a month. Blaze was so worried that several of his hairs turned white. Whenever he had a day off, he would drag me around the streets in search of delicious food. The steamed stuffed buns with soup from this place were the closest to the taste of our hometown that he could find at that time. I still remember that Blaze would get up early every day and cross half of the city to queue up and buy them for me. To prevent the Xiaolongbao from getting cold and losing their flavor, Blaze even prepared a thermal box. But later, he became busier and busier, and I gradually got used to the local food. Gradually, I rarely ate the Xiaolongbao from this place anymore. Now that I thought about it, the breakfast shop was only a few hundred meters away from the Xingfu residential area. Was it possible that Blaze had already reconnected with Siren from that time on? I picked up a Xiaolongbao and put it in my mouth. Because of the cold weather, the skin of the bun was slightly hard, and the soup inside no longer had the sweet and hot taste it had when it just came out of the pot. All that was left was a mouthful of easiness. After just one bite, I spat it out. Blaze immediately came over nervously. "What's wrong? Doesn't it suit your taste? You used to love." As he got closer, a faint and alluring fragrance wafted into my nostrils. I recognized it as a new perfume from a well-known brand that had just been released, the Sheer Temptation. When this perfume was first launched, I specifically dragged Blaze to the counter to try it out. At that time, I held up my wrist and asked Blaze if it smelled good. I still remember that he was scrolling through his phone and replying to messages while casually saying, "Just by the name, I can tell it's not a good thing." Just one sentence extinguished my desire to buy. I never expected that now I would actually smell that scent on him. I tugged at the corners of my mouth and asked him, "Where did you go last night?" Blaze was taken aback. "I already told you. There was an urgent matter at the company. The payment from the cooperation partner has been transferred. But there was suddenly a problem with our online project. So the boss called all of us in charge back overnight. By the time I finally finished dealing with it, it was almost dawn. I was afraid of disturbing your rest, so I took a nap at the company." As he spoke, he tried to stroke the top of my head to soothe me. I instinctively dodged backward. Blaze's hand froze in midair. He seemed a bit puzzled and furrowed his brows slightly. "Honey, are you unhappy that I went out in the middle of the night? Don't worry. The matter has been resolved, and it won't delay us from going back to attend Tichoyu's wedding. It's really hard for him. Even during the time he was having a tryst with his mistress, he didn't forget that we came back to our hometown this time to attend our teacher's wedding." But looking at this man whom I once thought I knew so well, and seeing him lying without blushing or panting, the past details of our affectionate and lingering moment shattered into pieces like spider silk. For the first time, I clearly realized that the man in front of me was no longer the familiar boy in my memory. I suppressed the nausea churning in my chest and curled the corners of my mouth. "Is that so? I went to your company, but you weren't there." With just one sentence, Blaze's expression changed instantly. Blaze's face visibly became flustered, and a hint of struggle flashed in his eyes. My heart sank, but I still smiled. "Just kidding. Look at your expression. You didn't really do something bad behind my back, did you?" Hearing me say this, Blaze's expression visibly relaxed, and he said irritably, "What bad thing could I do? You're just letting your imagination run wild. We still need to catch the train to go back to our hometown later. After finishing breakfast, let's pack up quickly." After saying that, he walked to the bathroom to wash up, and the moment he turned around, I wiped the smile off my face. Without hesitation, I threw that bag of breakfast into the trash can. Things that are broken, spoiled, or not fresh should be thrown away as soon as possible. Otherwise, it will only hurt yourself. On the high-speed train back to our hometown, Blaze kept showing his concern for me, asking if I was hungry, thirsty, having fulfilled Lansai, or tired. He asked almost every few minutes. It was so abnormal that it was as if he wished he could paste the words, "I'd done something sorry to you," on his forehead. The passengers beside us who didn't know the situation kept praising me for being lucky to have found such a good husband, and I just looked at them coldly. During the journey, Blaze's phone rang several times. He took it out, glanced at the caller ID, and then silenced the ringtone and continued to discuss the previous topic with me. But that ringtone was like the tolling of a deaf knell. Again and again. No matter how many times Blaze silenced it, it would ring again. I pointed at the phone. "Aren't you going to answer it?" Blaze frowned, and a look of impatience flashed across his face. "No need." Before he could finish his sentence, the ringtone rang again. This time, however, it was a text message. Blaze only took one look, and his expression changed from impatience to anxiety, and he became increasingly restless. Finally, having fulfilled Lay's sigh, he picked up the phone. "Honey, I'm going to the bathroom." I watched his back as he almost fled in a hurry, and the smile on my face gradually faded. I took out my phone. Just as the high-speed train was pulling out, I received a text message from that mysterious person. G6223. Car 7. Seat 12A. G6223 was exactly the number of the high-speed train that Blaze and I were taking back to our hometown today. And car 7 was right next to ours. I stood up and walked towards the adjacent carriage without hesitation. Since it wasn't a holiday, the whole carriage was empty, and there were hardly any passengers. So, I didn't need to search carefully at all. When I arrived at the adjacent carriage, I immediately saw the thin figure sitting by the window. And sitting beside her was the man I knew so well. It was Siren and Blaze. Blaze was constantly peeling an orange in his hand. Although he had a slight frown and looked a bit impatient, he carefully and attentively picked off the white threads on the orange pulp and then carefully fed it to Siren's mouth. Every time he did this, a smile would appear on Siren's pale and emaciated face. Blaze's stiff mouth corners would also involuntarily curl up slightly. I stared at them blankly. I suddenly remembered that during the lockdown due to the epidemic, our home was almost out of food and supplies. And there was only half a box of oranges that I had stocked up on during an event. At that time, I was extremely grateful that I had the habit of stocking up on things, so that we wouldn't starve to death, but Blaze didn't like it. He hated the slightly sour taste of oranges. He also hated the trouble of having his fingers stained yellow every time he peeled an orange, and having to wash them repeatedly. In the end, after I pleaded with him for a long time, he agreed to keep a part of the oranges, and we exchanged the rest for other food. Now, seeing Blaze peeling an orange for Siren so earnestly with my own eyes, I felt as if my heart had been torn open by a huge hole, and the cold wind kept blowing in. Whether it was the mutual support during our student days or the mutual assistance after graduation, like saving money together to buy a house, Blaze had always behaved as usual. He would say good morning, good afternoon, and good night to me every day, make brown sugar ginger tea for me during my period, and give me small surprises on our anniversaries, and so on. He had solemnly promised me that no matter how many years passed, he would maintain the habits we had during our relationship and let me always live like a young girl. However, later on, his work became busier and busier, and he had to work overtime until late at night every now and then. Sometimes, even during holidays, he had to rush back to the company because of his busy work. And those wonderful holiday plans that I had specially prepared for the two of us had to be cancelled time and time again. Every time this happened, Blaze would look full of guilt and repeatedly promise me that he would make it up to me next time. One next time, after another eventually came to nothing. Even so, I still firmly believed that Blaze was working hard for our future. However, the slap in the face came so unexpectedly. The man who had solemnly promised me that he would always love me and spoil me like a young girl was now affectionately hugging another woman and peeling the orange that he had once said he hated the most for her. I stepped forward. "Siren. Long time no see." I don't know what my expression was like, but Blaze clearly panicked the moment he saw me. The piece of orange that should have been fed to Siren's mouth fell to the ground. Blaze stood up at a loss. "Aurora." Before he could finish, Siren interrupted him. She was like a legitimate wife facing the provocation of a mistress. She took Blaze's arm and said calmly and composedly, "Honey. Who is she?" Huh. How ridiculous. Obviously, having fulfilled Ryan's sigh. I was Blaze's legitimate wife who had been in a relationship with him for many years and had already got the marriage certificate, but at this moment, my legally and actually recognized husband had become someone else's husband? I turned to look at Blaze. I didn't know when we got divorced. When did you remarry? There weren't many people in the carriage. And it was so quiet that even a whisper echoed. The commotion on our side soon attracted the attention of other passengers. And they all cast curious glances at us. Blaze seemed to be burned by those glances. And his whole face turned red with shame. He suddenly shook off Siren's arm and shouted, "Don't talk nonsense. I'm not your husband." In the past, even when Blaze was very angry, he would at most keep a straight face and not say anything. I rarely saw him in such a furious state. Now that I saw it, I even found it a bit novel. I couldn't help but think that even the most calm and self-possessed person would become ferocious when their affair was discovered. Siren seemed to be stunned by his series of reactions. She looked at Blaze blankly. "Honey. What's wrong with you?" If it weren't for the fact that I still had the same wedding ring as Blaze on my ring finger, just based on Siren's innocent little white rabbit appearance, I almost would have suspected that I was the mistress who had intervened in their marriage. But I really admire Siren. Obviously, having fulfilled Ryan's sigh. It was me who pushed Blaze to save her from being bullied back then. But now, she only remembers Blaze. She not only forgot me completely, but also bit the hand that fed her and directly stole my husband. Blaze seemed to be in a hurry and didn't care about Siren at all. He grabbed my arm and tried his best to explain. "Honey. Listen to me. Let me explain. I didn't know that Siren was also on this train. She kept calling me just now. So I..." At this moment, Blaze still hadn't realized where the problem really was. I interrupted him. "Blaze. Tell me the truth. Where did you really go last night? Is that you in the wedding photo in the WeChat moments? And when did you get together with Siren?" These consecutive questions that hit the mark directly left Blaze speechless. He turned pale and stammered, "You already know everything?" I shook my head. "I don't know anything. So I want to hear it from you." Blaze looked at me, and then at Siren beside him, his expression full of struggle. I waited quietly for his answer. Finally, having fulfilled Ryan's sigh, Blaze seemed to have finally made up his mind. He took my hand. "Honey. Let's go home first. When we get home, I'll tell you everything." But Siren didn't give him a chance. Her voice came softly. Honey, what do you want to do? Do you have a crush on this woman? Do you want to go with her? Have you forgotten that I'm carrying your child? Don't you want me anymore? Don't you want our child anymore?" This series of questions was like a series of heavy bombs. It made my head go blank, and I couldn't come to my senses for a long time. But in this moment of blankness, all the things that I didn't understand before suddenly had answers. So, it was because of the child. My gaze landed on Siren's still quite flat abdomen. It was really hard to believe that a little life was actually being nurtured in her thin and weak body, but the truth was that Blaze's originally firm expression wavered at this moment. The hand that had been tightly holding mine also loose, and for a moment, he looked at me, hesitating to speak. "Aurora. You. Go back first. I'll tell you everything later. Trust me." Trust? Trust a man who cheated on his wife during the marriage and got another woman pregnant. It would be easier for me to believe that a dog dislikes eating meat. I saw a trace of resentment flash in Siren's eyes because of Blaze's words. I chuckled and said, "Blaze. You stay with her properly. After all, it's the most dangerous period for a pregnant woman in the early stage. She's prone to miscarriage. You have to be careful. Don't make the same mistake again. In the end, it will all be in vain." Blaze's face turned pale. It was obvious that he had remembered something from the past. He still wanted to say something. But I didn't want to listen anymore. I pulled my hand out of his without hesitation and turned to leave. This time, without a low sigh, Blaze didn't chase after me. Well, it's understandable. Siren was no longer the chubby girl she used to be. She was also pregnant with his child. At this moment, he probably wished he could stay by Siren's side 24 hours a day. How could he care about the feelings of his original wife, who hadn't given birth to a child for him? Just as I returned to carriage 6, my phone vibrated. I opened the text message. And it was from the mysterious person. "You were too impulsive." I glanced at the passengers in the carriage. There was a young girl wearing headphones and listening to music. A young man looking down at his phone. There was a woman dressed fashionably, drying her eyebrows and applying makeup. There was also a young couple kissing as if there was no one else around, and a middle-aged couple coaxing their child to sleep. Just looking at their appearances, it was impossible to tell who the mysterious person was. I intercepted a section of the recording that I had been keeping on and sent it over. Then I casually walked towards the 3 single men and women. Soon, let out a low sorry. A new message came from the other side. "Not bad. You're not completely stupid." While observing, I replied, "Considering that I'm quite smart. Can you tell me now who you are exactly? And what's your purpose?" The other side fell silent again. Just as I thought the mysterious person wouldn't reply anymore and was about to sit back in my seat, the young man moved. At the same time, my phone vibrated again. I didn't have time to check it. I immediately walked up to the young man. "Is it you?" It was a youthful face that had just stepped into society. Facing my questioning, there was a look of confusion in his eyes. "Excuse me," in his eyes. "Do I know you?" Almost the moment he opened his mouth, I realized that he wasn't the mysterious person I was looking for. I apologized softly and turned to go back to my seat. As a result, while stepping back, I accidentally bumped into the fashionable woman who was applying makeup. Her black makeup bag fell to the ground. Cosmetics were scattered all over the floor. "Sorry. I didn't mean to." I quickly squatted down to help her pick up the things and kept apologizing. But the moment I looked up, I couldn't help but freeze. The woman's face was covered with thick foundation, long eyeliner, and bright red lips. Her whole makeup was bold and had a strong sense of aggression. However, what attracted me the most wasn't her makeup. It was her obviously abnormal left eye. Made of cold glass material, it reflected the light in the carriage, looking just like a doll's eye. She seemed to be used to others' scrutiny. She smiled and said, "It doesn't matter. Be more careful next time." After saying that, she packed her luggage and walked towards the other end of the carriage. A strange feeling flashed through my heart. However, before I could think deeply about it, my phone rang again. I quickly opened it. Only then did I realize that the previous message was a spam message. And this latest message was from the mysterious person. "Hello, Aurora. We'll meet again next time." I suddenly looked up. I instinctively searched for the figure of the fashionable woman. I saw that she had already disappeared at the end of the carriage. At this time, the broadcast had already started to remind that the high-speed train was about to arrive at the station. I quickly picked up my luggage and chased after her. But I didn't see that woman again until I got out of the high-speed railway station. I called her. "Is it you?" This time, she didn't reject the call. A woman's soft laugh came from the other end. "It's me. What does it feel like to witness your husband's betrayal with your own eyes?" What did it feel like? It was nothing more than thinking that I had bought a beloved cake, only to find a fly in it. And that fly only had half of its body left. That kind of disgusting and sticky feeling. But just from this simple sentence, I instantly grasped the key point in her words. Your target is Siren. Did she also steal your husband? If it were just about stealing a man, it would be much simpler. The woman smiled. Then her voice gradually turned cold, mixed with a deep-seated hatred. She's the one who caused my eye to be like this. I remembered the woman's left eye that had no luster and only reflected light when I saw her just now. I immediately understood. I couldn't help but feel a bit sorry. Seeing that I didn't speak, she smiled and said, I didn't lose my eye in vain. Aurora, you're unfortunate, but also lucky. Tonight, I'll send you a gift. Remember to make good use of it. After saying that, she hung up the phone without waiting for my reply. A gift? At this moment, the gift I most hoped to receive was the divorce agreement with Blaze. But it was obvious that this woman's purpose was to use my hand to take revenge on Siren. And punishing Blaze was just a byproduct. On the way home, Blaze sent me a message. Wife, Siren doesn't have any relatives here. I'll settle her down first and then come back. Wait for me. I will definitely give you an explanation. I just glanced at it and deleted it in disgust. When I was almost home, I sent a text message to my mom. She rushed all the way to the entrance of the residential area to pick me up. As early as when Teacher Liu sent us the wedding invitation, I had told her that I would go home and stay for a few days. She knew that Liu Yan was our head teacher in high school, and the efforts she put into Blaze and me were no less than those of a mother. So she had already tidied up the room for us early and even prepared a lot of wedding gifts and red envelopes. Now, haha. Seeing that I came back alone, she couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Where's Blaze? Didn't he say he would come back with you?" Him. I dragged my luggage and walked beside her, casually saying, "He's with his wife and child." "You girl. What are you talking nonsense about?" She tapped my forehead and said, hating that I couldn't live up to expectations. "You've been with Blaze for so long. Why don't you hurry up and have a child? Let me tell you, as a woman gets older, the risk of giving birth is much higher." "Mom." I stopped and exhaled softly. I heard my own voice. Calm and rational, but with a trace of bitterness hid and deep down that was not easily noticeable. "I can't have children. I won't be able to have children in this lifetime." My mom looked at me as if she didn't understand what I was saying. She was stunned for a while. Then she took the suitcase from my hand and smiled. "You child. You're lying to your mom just to avoid having children. Do you think I'm stupid? All right. All right. I won't urge you anymore. You two can decide for yourselves. Don't joke about such things in the future. Your mom is getting old and can't stand being scared." As she spoke, she patted her chest and walked towards home. She said it so lightly, but I clearly saw that her steps were obviously much faster. As if she couldn't wait to escape from some truth. She knew. I used to like children so much that I would never joke about such a thing. When I was washing up at night, I slowly reached out my hand and stroked my flat abdomen. There was a time when a little life was once nurtured there. She had stayed in my body for 3 short months. But due to an accident, she had to be taken out of the warm womb. I still remember that it was not long after Blaze and I graduated, in order to establish ourselves in the city as soon as possible. We almost put all our energy into our work. Blaze was even more desperate in socializing. He was busy until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning every day and came home drunk with the smell of alcohol all over him. At that time, I had a lot of work pressure, coupled with the fact that my periods were really on time. I didn't even realize that I was pregnant at all. So, when I was in a trance and accidentally missed a step, I didn't even think about protecting my belly. It wasn't until the bright red blood spread all over the ground and I felt a sharp pain in my abdomen that I belatedly realized I had lost my child. A kind neighbor found me and sent me to the hospital. No matter how much I cried and begged the doctor, I couldn't save my child. Even worse, because of this accidental miscarriage, the doctor told me that it would be very difficult for me to get pregnant again in the future. I lay in the hospital for a whole night and called Blaze countless times. But no one answered. It wasn't until the next morning that Blaze finally showed up, reeking of alcohol. He knelt down in front of my hospital bed and begged for my forgiveness. He said that he had been socializing with clients until dawn and didn't notice the calls because his phone was on silent. He apologized to me, saying that he shouldn't have come home so late and shouldn't have left me to face all this alone. He comforted me, saying that it didn't matter if we didn't have children. He said that his parents had died early, and there was no one to force him to have children to carry on the family line. He even told me that he was originally a DINK. If it weren't for the fact that I liked children, he would have had a vasectomy long ago. When he said these words, Blaze's expression was so affectionate and sincere. So sincere that I believed it to be true. When Vengeance's gift was delivered to me, Blaze also came back. The man who had sworn during the day that I should trust him and said he would give me an explanation. The moment he opened the door and saw me, he slapped me hard across the face. This slap directly knocked me to the ground, and my ears were ringing. It took me a long time to come to my senses. Blaze stared at me with bloodshot eyes, as if he wanted to drink my blood and eat my flesh. "Aurora, I thought you would at most not be able to accept my infidelity. But I didn't expect you to be so vicious. Do you know how Siren has been living these years?" She didn't take the college entrance examination that year because her parents forcibly took her back and forced her to marry an old bachelor in the village. She was tortured for 8 long years. Her mind has long been deranged. If I hadn't met her a month ago and learned about her situation, she would still be going through who knows how many torments by now. I finally managed to stabilize her mentally a bit. But then you tipped off her parents and let them come and tie her up and take her back. I don't think you can't accept my infidelity. You're clearly jealous that she can get pregnant with my child. You can't have children yourself. And you don't want others to have them either. Blaze questioned me harshly one sentence after another. He didn't even need my answer and directly sentenced me to death. Looking at his ferocious expression, I just thought everything was extremely ridiculous. Even though I knew Blaze had cheated and I had witnessed his intimacy with Siren with my own eyes, I just thought that the fate between us had come to an end. From beginning to end. I just wanted to hear the truth from his mouth. As long as he told me himself that he had changed his heart and that he wanted to be with Siren, I could accept it calmly and fulfill the last bit of dignity for both of us. But I didn't expect that after 10 years of our relationship, we couldn't even maintain the last bit of dignity now. With a slap sound, I used all my strength to fiercely return that slap to him. He was stunned by my slap and instinctively wanted to fight back. My mother suddenly rushed out of the room. "You beast! My daughter has been with you for 10 years. Not only did you cheat, but you actually even laid a hand on her for a woman outside? I'll fight you." As she said that, she picked a bench and threw it at him. Blaze quickly dodged. The bench hit the tea table, and the glass shattered all over the floor. I was stunned by this scene. After coming to my senses, I quickly went up to stop my mother. "Mom, Min, why are you awake? You should go and rest quickly and don't hurt yourself." My mother was stopped by me. And she was so angry that she was trembling all over. "If I had known you were suffering such grievances outside, I would have called you back no matter what. Daughter, get a divorce. We're not going to live with him anymore. A man who is unfaithful can't be kept around for even a single day. Ever since my father passed away, my mother has focused all her attention on me. In order not to make her worry, I've always only told her the good news and not the bad. I just didn't expect Blaze to be so thoughtless that he actually started making a scene with me right at home. I was worried that it would make her ill from anger. So I quickly persuaded her. "Mom, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Let us handle this matter ourselves. Okay?" Only after I repeatedly assured her that I would definitely get a divorce from Blaze, and there wouldn't be any lingering, did she obediently go back to her room and lie down. I took out the sleeping pill she always kept, confirmed the dosage, and coaxed her to sleep before going back to the living room again. Blaze was curled up on the sofa, exuding a sense of dejection all over. I looked at him coldly and said word by word, "Blaze, anyone can make fun of me for not being able to have children. But you can't. Because you don't deserve to. As for Siren, whether she's dead or alive, whether she marries a bachelor or is sent to a mental hospital, what does it have to do with me? Do you think you're really amazing and great? You saved her from being bullied 8 years ago. And you saved her again when she was mentally ill 8 years later? Do you think you're a savior? Stop kidding." I rummaged through the drawer and took out a stack of photos and a certificate of mental illness identification, and directly threw them in Blaze's face. The subject of each photo was Siren. There were photos of her getting out of a BMW, photos of her arm in arm with a wealthy man entering a high-end club, and photos of her snuggling with Blaze and passionately kissing at the door, reluctant to part. There were even photos of her during her fat days, when she was in a juvenile detention center. That certificate of mental illness identification clearly stated in black and white that Siren had no mental illness. Blaze's hands trembled as he flipped through those photos one by one. His pupils dilated, and he could hardly believe it. "How is this possible? How could you have these photos? You must have faked them and deliberately used them to deceive me. It must be like that." Looking at Blaze's self-deceiving appearance, I for the first time doubted whether I had been blind in the past. When did that boy who used to compete with me for the first and second place in the grade become so stupid? Blaze. I pointed at the only photo of Siren in the juvenile detention center. Even though the time was long ago, and the picture was blurry, It was still vaguely discernible that the subject in the photo was the siren who had been bullied, and whom we all thought was the victim back then. Siren didn't take the college entrance examination that year. Not because her parents took her back and forced her to get married. Rather, it was because she poked out a girl's eye. That girl as teacher used daughter vengeance. As early as the first time I saw vengeance. No. It should be that when I attended the class reunion a month ago. I already knew the truth of everything. Blaze's infidelity had long been traceable. From the times when he worked overtime again and came back with the faint scent of a woman on him each time. I had already suspected something. It's just a pity that at that time, I was in charge of an important project and didn't have the time to deal with his messy affairs. Until that class reunion. Blaze made an excuse of working overtime and couldn't attend. I went alone. But unexpectedly, I saw him walking into a hotel room with Siren. At that time, I still didn't recognize that thin and beautiful figure as Siren. Just as I was about to hire a private detective to investigate, a classmate suddenly lamented that the fat girl Siren who had been bullied in the past had, in just a few years, turned into a beautiful woman. Seeing that everyone didn't believe it, he even specifically took out Siren's photo to show everyone. It was because of this that I realized. It turned out that the person Blaze had been cheating with during this period was our former classmate Siren. Later, I deliberately asked that classmate for Siren's WeChat. And when adding her, I deliberately mentioned that I had once helped her get rid of being bullied. Sure enough, once the former ugly duckling turned into a white swan. She didn't like being reminded of those embarrassing past experiences. Not long after I added her, she posted a photo of her wedding dress with Blaze on her WeChat moments. And Blaze was so stupid that he didn't know how to hide it. That very night, because of a phone call from Siren, he couldn't wait to go and have a tryst with her. This allowed me to find out Siren's address. Taking advantage of the opportunity to go back to our hometown, I specially arranged for someone to go to Siren's place and take pictures of the evidence of their cohabitation. Vengeance taking the initiative to contact me was something I hadn't expected. However, it was precisely because of Vengeance's involvement that I learned the real reason why Siren didn't take the college entrance examination back then. The cause of all this was just that Vengeance accidentally caught Siren rummage through the college entrance examination questions from previous years when the teacher wasn't around. The stupid and unaware Siren never thought that the real examination questions were all sealed and kept, and it was impossible for them to be in a high school teacher's office. So, when she realized that she had been discovered, her first reaction was to ruin Vengeance so that she couldn't identify her. But Vengeance's screams attracted the attention of other teachers. And Siren was caught red-handed. Later, Siren entered the juvenile detention center and suffered a lot of torture. But because of this, she transformed from the fat girl, who was hated by everyone in the past, into a skinny and beautiful woman. Although she didn't have stunning beauty, it was enough to attract some men who were greedy for novelty. So, after one of Blaze's business dinners, Siren reunited with him. She used her earth-shaking changes to fabricate a series of pitiful and sympathetic lies. Blaze, that fool Undavan, didn't even bother to confirm and was directly led astray. When I slowly told Blaze all of this, the expression on his face had completely crumbled. He shook his head desperately, refusing to believe. It's impossible. You're lying to me about all of this. I looked at him expressionlessly. Whether you believe it or not is up to you. Blaze, I gave you countless chances to tell me the truth. As long as you told me the truth, I would have told you all these things a long time ago. But you just didn't. You kept evading again and again. Now that we've laid everything out on the table, let's talk about the divorce. Blaze pursed his lips tightly. As proud as he was, he just couldn't believe that he had been played around by the woman he had once looked down on. He stubbornly said, even if what you said is true. So what? Those are all things in the past. I accompanied Siren to the hospital for an examination myself. And she is indeed pregnant. And you'll never be able to have a child that truly belongs to you in your life. For a woman like you who can't have children, after getting a divorce from me, which man would still be willing to marry you? The one who should think this through clearly is you. The closer people are, the more they know each other's weaknesses and know what way to use to truly hurt the other person. I admit that Blaze's words directly stabbed at me. But at the same time, I wanted to laugh. Laugh at his naivety. The child a woman gives birth to must be her own. But as for whether the father is the biological one, that's not certain. The implication was that with Siren's chaotic life, it was unknown whose child she was carrying. Blaze obviously also realized this. As I took out more ironclad evidence of Siren's ambiguous relationships with others and his infidelity during the marriage, his face turned from white to green and then from green to white. Finally, hadn't fulfilled me. His lips trembling. He stammered, "Aurora. You're so terrifying." Was I terrifying? I didn't know. The moment I was sure that Blaze had cheated, my heart had already completely died. For some people, even if I loved them deeply, the moment they decided to betray me, they no longer deserved even a trace of my attachment. I would only think about how to use what I had already mastered to seek the greatest benefits for myself. Vengeance helped me collect evidence of Blaze and Siren's infidelity. And I, taking advantage of the fact that I had once helped Siren get rid of being bullied, found out the contact information of Siren's parents for her. After Vengeance's eyes were ruined by Siren, Siren's parents regarded Vengeance's family as a scourge and hid away early. Now, I have enough evidence in my hands. And Vengeance has also gotten what she wanted. I retrieved the surveillance footage from home and intercepted the scenes where Blaze hit me. Together with the recording of him admitting his infidelity, and the evidence of his cohabitation with Siren, I sent them all to the lawyer. Let the other party handle the subsequent series of divorce matters for me. After that, I went to Ticheliu's wedding alone. When I arrived at the hotel, I found that there was no so-called wedding. When the waiter saw me, he directly handed me an envelope. I opened it, and inside was a photo. The subject was still Siren, but unlike her previous high spirits, she had a mess of hair on her head, was wearing a red wedding dress, and was standing next to a skinny old man in his 60s. Just as she had lied to Blaze. She had fulfilled her wish, and was taken back by her parents and forced to marry the old bachelor in the village. In fact, I didn't hate Siren at all. The one who betrayed our relationship and cheated was Blaze. Even if it wasn't Siren, it would be someone else. So, when I saw this photo, there was no ripple in my heart. On the back of the photo, there was a sentence written, "Have a pleasant cooperation." By the lake in winter. I snatched the cigarette from the school bully. "Stop smoking. It's bad for your health." However, he waved his hand and threw me into the icy lake. Then he walked away without looking back. Who could have imagined that the person reading me like this now would, a few months later, say to me in an almost pleading tone, "Ada, I'm being fulfilled my obsession. I haven't smoked. And I haven't fought either. Would you please like me?" Blaze was the school bully in our school and also the son of my mother's best friend. But I had never talked to him before. We should have had no connection in this lifetime. But one day, his parents had a car accident. After my mother received the call from the hospital, she quickly took me to the hospital. In the hospital, a young man was sitting with his head lowered outside the emergency room. He was dressed in black, his hands tightly clasped together, his eyes red and empty. Although he had no expression on his face, a strong sense of sadness was evident all over him. He was Blaze. The light in the emergency room went out, and the doctor came out. Before my mother could stand up and ask about the situation, Blaze rushed up, "Doctor, how are my parents?" The doctor looked at his red eyes and turned away reluctantly. "Sorry. We did our best." After saying that, the doctor lowered his head and left quickly. Sorry. We did our best. The meaning of this sentence was obvious. He stood there, stunned. My mother glanced at him, wanting to say something but failing to do so. After giving me some instructions, she went to deal with the aftermath of his parents' death. After a long while, Blaze came to his senses and walked out of the hospital quickly. His hair covered his eyes, making it impossible to see any of his emotions. I looked down. I found that his hand was clenched so tightly that it was bleeding. I was a bit worried about him, so I secretly followed him. I followed Blaze to the lake. There was no one by the lake, with no one by the lake, and it was very quiet. A great place for relaxing. The young man stared blankly at the lake. He took out a cigarette from his coat pocket. He struck a match. lit the cigarette, took a puff, and exhaled. The smoke soon enveloped him, making him look even more melancholy. Looking at his back, I somehow felt a pang of pity for him. So I walked over. I snatched the cigarette from him and threw it into the lake. Stop smoking. It's bad for your health. He ignored me. He lowered his eyes and took out another cigarette. I snatched it away again. What are you doing? The young man finally turned his head to look at me, his words full of impatience. I finally got a clear look at his face. He frowned. His beautiful eyes were red, and tears were constantly welling up in his eyes. It seemed that the tears would roll down at any moment. Smoking is bad for your health. Don't. It's none of your business. He interrupted me. He turned his head and lit another cigarette. This time, Blaze blocked me with his hand. I tried hard to pull his hand away, but he impatiently waved his hand. Smack. I was thrown into the lake. I looked up at Blaze. I was somewhat incredulous. I saw him pause for a moment. And then he quickly turned around and walked away without looking back. The lake water in winter was extremely cold. I got a fever as soon as I got home. But maybe my brain was damaged by the fever. Because as soon as I closed my eyes, all I could think of were Blaze's beautiful but hurt eyes. I didn't see Blaze again after that day. Until the third day. My mother called and told me. After Blaze's parents passed away, no relatives were willing to take him in. And she asked if I would like to let him move in with us. Somehow, I felt a little excited. Of course I would. When will he move in? My mother seemed a bit surprised that I agreed so readily. We'll go to help him move his luggage after school today. I hung up the phone. I was so excited that I was absent-minded in class all day. As for why I was excited, I didn't know either. Finally, school was over. I hummed a little tune happily and rushed home. But I heard the conversation of several boys behind me. Hey, have you heard? That Blaze from our school is going to pick a fight again today. I heard it. But the other guy is really good at fighting this time. Blaze is in trouble this time. I was taken aback and quickly turned around and asked, where are they going to fight? The boys were startled by me, behind a grocery store. In the alley. I hesitated for a moment. And finally ran in that direction. Sure enough, I saw Blaze there. The young man moved nimbly and briskly, having fulfilled my obsession. And the other purse and didn't seem to be his match. Seeing this, I finally let out a sigh of relief. I didn't dare to go up and cause trouble. So I could only secretly observe them. I saw the other person secretly take out something shiny from his pants pocket. What was it? My pupils suddenly shrank. And my heart clenched tightly. It was a knife. However, Blaze didn't seem to notice. The man raised the knife and stabbed towards Blaze's neck. Blaze. He has a knife. I immediately shouted inside. Blaze immediately turned his body to one side. But he was still slashed. Blood flowed down his arm. But he didn't seem to feel the pain. He had no expression on his face and quickly snatched the knife away. Seeing that he couldn't win, the man fled in a hurry. I walked into the alley. Blaze was leaning against the wall, gasping for breath. I looked at the wound on his arm. It was simply horrible. I grabbed his wrist and pulled him out of the alley. Where are you taking me? The pharmacy, I replied. He suddenly stopped and pulled his hand back. Thank you just now. But you don't need to meddle in my affairs. He took 2 steps away and then turned around. And I'm sorry about last time. If you need anything, I'll try my best to help you. Then come with me to the pharmacy. He was taken aback. Before he could speak, I grabbed his hand again and walked towards the pharmacy. After buying the medicine, I pulled him to sit on a chair by the roadside. I was about to apply the medicine to his wound. But he snatched it away. Thanks. I'll do it myself. Then he poured the alcohol directly onto the wound. I frowned tightly. Goodness. Why do I feel like my own flesh is hurting too? I couldn't stand it anymore. So I snatched the ointment and insisted on applying it to his wound, seeing that he couldn't persuade me otherwise. He didn't say anything more. I applied the ointment and wrapped the bandage. I tied a nice bow. I looked up with satisfaction. Then I saw that his eyes were red again. I didn't know when. Tears were welling up in his eyes. Just like that day. I was a bit at a loss. But I quickly calmed down. I grabbed his wrist. It's getting late. Let's go home. I saw Blaze's eyes light up. But when I looked closely, his long eyelashes had covered his eyes. I must have been seeing things. However, Blaze unexpectedly didn't refuse this time and really let me pull him along obediently. On the way, I looked back at him. The young man had his head lowered. His bangs were long and covered his eyes. But it was still possible to see that his eyes were red. I immediately understood his little thought. He didn't want others to see him with tears in his eyes. I stopped. I took out a black hat from my school bag. I put it directly on Blaze's head. You look cooler when you raise your head. After saying that, I turned around and continued to pull him along. Thank you. The words were very soft, almost disappearing in the wind. But I still heard them. When I looked back again, the young man had raised his head and put one hand in his pocket. That's right. This was the unique temperament that belonged to him. It was snowing. And I buried my face in my scarf. I secretly smiled. When we got home, Blaze's things had already been moved in. I went back to my room and went to bed after dinner. So many things had happened today. Since tomorrow was Saturday, I decided to have a good sleep. But I really couldn't hold it in anymore. I still got up and went to the bathroom. After dealing with it, I was about to return to the warm embrace of my quilt. Click. When I passed by Blaze's room, I heard the sound of a lighter. I frowned. I gently opened the door a crack. A pungent smell of tobacco wafted out. I held my breath and peeked inside. I saw his back facing me. He was standing by the window, surrounded by smoke. His back was still as lonely and melancholy as ever. I pushed the door open and walked in. Blaze. Why are you smoking again? He extinguished the cigarette and opened the window. He turned around and faced me. It's none of your business. Even if you don't consider your own health, you should at least think about your family. If they knew you. I don't have a family anymore. He interrupted me. I was stunned and realized that I had said the wrong thing. He lowered his eyes. The moonlight shone on his profile, making him look even more lonely and melancholy. Then I'll be your family from now on. He suddenly raised his eyes and looked at me. And there seemed to be a light shining in his eyes. What did you say? I pursed my lips and lowered my head. Not wanting to meet his gaze, I said, I'll be your family from now on. If I see you smoking, I'll feel heartbroken. Okay. The young man's clear voice broke through the silent night. I won't smoke anymore from now on. What did he say? I looked up and stared at him in disbelief. I saw him leaning against the window, a smile appearing on his face. This was the first time I saw him smile. He looked very nice when he smiled. Very sunny. The moonlight shining on him made him look a bit more gentle. I was mesmerized. When I came to my senses, I realized that I had been staring at him in a daze. I quickly ran out of the room in embarrassment. But I came back soon after. I took out a few lollipops from my pocket and handed them to him. You don't have to coax me. If you feel bad and want to smoke, just eat the candy. You can quit smoking gradually. As soon as he took the candies, I ran away again. I vaguely heard him chuckling behind me. Back in my room, I threw myself into the bed. I had an unexpectedly sweet dream that night. And next day when I woke up, I didn't see Blaze. According to my parents, he had gone out very early. I also tiddied up and went out. When I passed by a boutique, I was attracted by a very nice small jar. The boss said it was for applying on wounds. And if applied, there wouldn't be any scars left. I couldn't help but think of Blaze. That wound was so deep. It should leave a scar. Right. As I was thinking, I suddenly came to my senses. Why should I care about him? Whether he has a scar or not has nothing to do with me. But in the end, I still bought that bottle of ointment. When I got home, dinner was already ready. I knocked on Blaze's door. Blaze. It's time for dinner. There was no response. I called out twice more. But still no one answered. Strange. There was clearly light coming through the crack of the door. I pushed the door open. I was startled by the scene in front of me. Blaze was sitting on the ground, leaning against the bed, and his body was covered with bloodstains. What's wrong with you? I quickly ran in. But when I got beside him and took a closer look, he was just applying medicine and bandaging the wound from last time. I stood there awkwardly, thinking about how I had run over so anxiously just now. I just wanted to find a hole in the ground to crawl into. Theft. Blaze's laughter reached my ears. My face turned even redder. We looked at each other, and the atmosphere became more and more awkward. Finally, having told why, Blaze spoke first. It's not very convenient for me to apply medicine with one hand. I'll help you. Thank goodness. The awkward atmosphere was finally broken. I quickly took out that bottle of ointment from my pocket. This is the ointment I bought today. If you apply it, there won't be any scars. You can use it when you change the dressing in the future. He didn't say anything. Just stared blankly at the ointment in my hand. Seeing that he didn't make a sound, I directly unscrewed the bottle. I took a little with my fingertips and was about to apply it to him. No need. I'll do it myself. Blaze came to his senses. He subconsciously reached out his hand to grab the bottle. But he grabbed my hand instead. Obviously, having shy. As a girl, I should be the one feeling shy. But he let go of my hand as if he had been electrocuted first. He even gave me a glare. I looked at him in confusion. Considering that he was a patient now, I didn't argue with him. I quickly lowered my head and continued to apply the medicine to him. But the more I applied, the more I felt something was wrong. Just this gentle physical contact of applying the ointment. I could feel the temperature of his body getting hotter and hotter. But I didn't think much of it. Because the heating was on in the room. It was quite normal to be a bit hot. I quickly bandaged the wound well. Then I raised my head with satisfaction. I saw his earlobes were so red that they seemed to be bleeding. When he saw me looking at him, he suddenly stood up. I'm hungry. I'm going to have dinner. Since that day, I found that he seemed to be very resistant to physical contact with me. I guessed that he might have something like mysophobia. So I didn't think too much about it. Knock. 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 Hearing the knock on the door, I hurriedly ran over to open the door. I guessed that Blaze should be back from school. But when I opened the door, it wasn't Blaze standing at the door. It was a gentle and handsome-looking teenager. He was my desk mate Luna. He could see that I was a bit surprised. So he narrowed his eyes and gave me a gentle smile. Teacher Wang told me that your grades have dropped a bit recently and asked me to come and tutor you. Oh, okay. Then I'll trouble you. I also gave him a smile. I'm actually very good-looking. When I smile, my eyes and eyebrows are curved. Just like a budding flower bud. The teenager quickly blushed. It's okay. We exchanged some polite greetings hypocritically. Until Blaze came back. As soon as he entered the door today, he stared at my face unusually. Although his eyes were still as calm as ever. But if you looked closely, you could still see the amazement hidden in his eyes. Your classmate? Yes. He's here to help me with my studies. Blaze. Let me tell you. He's really amazing. This was the first time Blaze had taken the initiative to talk to me. I was overjoyed. I guessed that he should be interested in Luna. So I told him a lot of things about Luna. I chattered happily for a long time. Then I realized that the teenager in front of me was getting colder and colder in expression. He looked at Luna with some dissatisfaction. He sized him up and down, he's just so. But it's none of my business anyway. After saying that, he ignored me. When he walked past Luna, their shoulders bumped into each other heavily. Ouch. Luna winced in pain, holding his shoulder. Blaze, on the other hand, acted as if nothing had happened. He walked towards his room without pausing. I looked at his back and mumbled, does he really have no pain nerves? The long tutoring session finally ended. Luna packed his things and prepared to go home. He had already walked out of the door. But he suddenly turned around and whispered to me, Ava. You should pay attention to Blaze. It's okay. He's just like that. Cold to everyone. I interrupted him. Luna didn't say anything more. But as if he had seen something, he suddenly smiled at me. Eva. See you tomorrow. After saying that he reached out and ruffled my hair. Then he quickly closed the door. The action was doting and extremely gentle. I looked at the closed door. I was stunned. Why did he ruffle my hair? I turned around in confusion. I saw Blaze leaning against the sofa and staring at me. His gaze was cold and terrifying. Meeting the girl's cold gaze. He lowered his eyes. And his long eyelashes covered his eyes, making it impossible to see his emotions. I suddenly realized that my actions with Luna just now were too ambiguous. I subconsciously wanted to explain. It's not like that. Bang. The sound of the door closing cut off my words. He didn't look at me and turned back to his room. I pursed my lips. An inexplicable feeling of sadness welled up in my heart. It was so stuffy that I couldn't catch my breath. Why did I want to explain? He didn't care anyway. When I got back to my room, the more I thought about it, the sadder I felt. I couldn't fall asleep no matter how I lay in bed. Suddenly, I sat up abruptly. Wait a minute. Why should I care whether Blaze cares about me or not? An unacceptable guess swept over me. I was stunned. Could it be that I've fallen for him? Although it was hard to accept. But I couldn't deny that this was the truth. Why don't I like so many gentle and excellent boys? But I just have to like this cold and peculiar person. I supported my forehead with both hands, feeling like crying but without any tears. But I still went to sleep without thinking too much. Because the next day was the sports meeting. And I had signed up for a competition. The next day, I got up early. The event I signed up for was the middle and long distance running. Before the race, I looked around with anticipation. I didn't see Blaze. Although I was a bit disappointed, I wasn't discouraged yet. Minutes, they would only affect my running speed. As soon as the whistle blew, I was like an arrow leaving the bow, running forward quickly. I rationally adjusted my breathing and running rhythm. Slowly, I overtook one contestant after another. But just when I was about to reach the finish line and become the first place, suddenly, a child ran onto the track. To avoid him, I lost my balance and fell heavily. Seeing that the distance between the contestants behind me and me was getting closer, I still gritted my teeth and got up. I crossed the finish line. Then I slumped down on the ground. Really, I didn't have the slightest bit of strength left. As I was gasping for breath, I felt someone help me up. My eyes lit up, and I turned my face. It was Luna. He helped me to sit on a chair beside. He looked at my knee, which was already bleeding from the abrasion. I'll take you to the infirmary. I waved my hand. Let me rest for a while longer. I was waiting. I was waiting for Blaze to come and find me. But he didn't. I looked at the time. It had been half an hour since I fell. I lowered my eyes in disappointment. Luna. Thank you. I've recovered almost. I'll go home first. But he insisted on sending me home. I looked down at my bleeding knee. I nodded. Then I'll trouble you. On the way home, Luna chatted with me off and on. I could tell. He was trying to cheer me up. I didn't want to let down his kindness. So although I wasn't very happy, I still curved my lips and chatted with him. We talked and laughed all the way. When we got home, I finally put away that forced smile. When I walked into the living room, I saw Blaze sitting on the sofa playing games. I smiled self-deprecatingly. As expected, he didn't go to watch my race. That night, I caught Blaze smoking again. I stood at the door of his room. I recalled the night when Blaze made a promise to me. The scene of that night was still vivid in my mind. I remembered Blaze's sunny and pleasant smile that night. I put my hand on the doorknob. After hesitating for a moment, I still pushed the door open. The familiar pungent smell of tobacco. The familiar back view. The familiar scene. He had broken his promise again. I felt an inexplicable surge of anger. Blaze. Didn't you tell me that you wouldn't smoke anymore? Why can't you be like Luna? He never. Enough. He interrupted me. I looked up and squinted at his eyes. His eyes were still so blurry that it was impossible to see his emotions. He was still so cold, making it hard to figure him out. Since you like Luna so much, then go to him. Why are you trying to control me? I don't need you to meddle in my business. I don't need you to meddle in my business. He used this sentence to shut me out again. It was as if we had gone back to the day we first met. As if nothing had happened. Our relationship seemed to have regressed to zero again. I pressed my lips tightly. I could clearly feel my eyes gradually getting moist, as if the tears would well up in the next second. I tried my best to control my breathing. I didn't want the tears to fall. But thinking about the little bits and pieces between us these days. Strangely, tears just fell one by one. I couldn't control it at all. I finally saw Blaze's eyes clearly. I saw that his eyes were filled with panic and helplessness. And he quickly adjusted himself. He reached out and wiped away my tears with his sleeve. The girl's long eyelashes were covered with teardrops, which flowed down her fair and flawless cheeks. They fell on the boy's sleeve, then spread out and spread infinitely. It was snowing outside. Snowflakes drifted into the room. They landed on the girl's injured knee. I said with anticipation again, "It hurts." I didn't expect that as soon as I finished speaking, the boy knelt down on one knee and applied medicine to my knee. I was a bit puzzled. How did he know that my knee was injured? Could it be? I pursed my lips and still said it out. "Blaze. You know what? I had a race today. And I got injured." "I know. Then why didn't you come to care about me?" Blaze suddenly applied the medicine more forcefully. It was as if he was punishing me. "If I interrupted your chance to be alone with the person you like, you'd be really angry. Right?" I was stunned. What person I like? What are you talking about? Who do I like? Don't you like Luna? Although I was very puzzled, I still shook my head without hesitation. No, I don't." "Who told you that?" He finally raised his eyes and looked at me. The room was very dark in the late night, but the young man's eyes were shining brightly. He put a band-aid on my knee. "Oh. I just heard it casually today. It's okay if it's not true. My uncle and an aunt asked me to keep an eye on you and not let you have a puppy love." I was about to continue asking who told him about this. He pushed me out of the room with a guilty conscience. At the moment he closed the door, I saw Blaze smiling. He still looked so good when he smiled, although his smile wasn't as gentle and charming as others. It was full of freedom, sunshine, and vitality. It was more attractive than anyone else's smile. This was probably his unique personal charm, and also the reason why I liked him. Back in my room, I leaned against the door, stunned. A lot of information kept hitting my brain. So he came to watch my game but didn't come to find me because he thought I was with Luna. Wait a minute. Remembering Blaze's various behaviors these days, I was shocked by my own thoughts. Could he be jealous of Luna? Could it be that he likes me too? But this wasn't enough to confirm whether he really liked me or not. So these days, I began to test him, either intentionally or unintentionally. I found that as long as I smiled at him or had some physical contact with him, his ears would turn red as if they were about to bleed. I searched on the internet. It turned out that this was a sign of his shyness. But he always pretended to be cold on his face. However, I was really happy, because I finally confirmed that the young man I liked also liked me. I was thinking about how to confess to him and confirm our relationship. Suddenly, 'cause I remembered his cold attitude towards me before, I gritted my teeth in hatred. No way. I can't let him off so easily. My mind was running fast. An evil plan came to my mind. I smiled wickedly. "Fine. You like to pretend to be aloof, right? Then I won't confess to you. I want you to lower your head and chase me on your own initiative." So, I began my revenge plan. A few days later in the morning a young man ran into class at full speed. He plopped down next to Blaze. He said to him excitedly, "Hey. Big news. The class beauty from Class A is going to transfer to our class." Blaze didn't look at him. He just gave a hum and continued writing something in his notebook. His name was Sunny. And he was Blaze's good friend. Seeing that Blaze just gave a faint hum, Sunny was a bit disappointed. He shouted even louder, "Hey. She's really pretty. That face. That figure. TSK. Almost any man would fall in love with her." As he spoke, Sunny began to act like a love-struck fool. He kept chattering to himself. Blaze was a bit impatient. He put down his pen and shouted at him, "What does it have to do with me? I won't like her anyway." He said this very loudly. The classroom suddenly fell silent. But it wasn't because of what Blaze said. It was because the teacher came. The teacher walked to the podium and cleared his throat twice. All the students obediently went back to their seats. I have something to say. We have a new classmate transferring to our class. As he spoke, he hooked his finger towards the door. Come in. The girl outside the door entered the classroom as she was told. She came to the teacher's side. The girl had a head of jet black hair hanging down on her shoulders. Her skin was as white as coagulated fat. And her eyes were bright and clear like water. At this moment, a ray of sunlight happened to shine in through the window. It fell on the girl. She was surrounded by the golden sunlight, making her look even more gentle and pretty. Hello, everyone. My name is Ava. Please take care of me. The girl's voice was gentle and pleasant. Blaze, who had been lowering his head and writing something, suddenly raised his head. That's right. The class beauty of Class A they were talking about was me. I lowered my eyes. I found Blaze in the crowd at a glance. Of course. I heard what they said just now. I gave him a sweet smile. With my eyebrows curved and my red lips slightly raised. Several students under the podium blushed when they saw it. But in my heart, I cursed secretly. You said you won't like me. Right? Blaze, cutting fulfill wide sigh. You just wait for me. Just as I was thinking. The teacher patted me on the shoulder. He arranged my seat next to Blaze. It was exactly what I wanted. I almost wanted to kneel down on one knee immediately and say to the teacher, Teacher, you are my hero. I put my things on the desk, while tidying up my belongings. I secretly glanced at Blaze out of the corner of my eye. I found that he was also secretly looking at me. I tried hard to suppress the corners of my mouth that wanted to rise, alas. He's such a TS-undery. As soon as the class was over, the classmates in the class all surrounded me. First, because I was a new classmate. Second, because I was really quite pretty. I smiled and chatted with them. I smiled shyly with my hand covering my mouth. My eyebrows curved. And my eyes as gentle as water. During the conversation and laughter, my voice was pleasant to hear. And my laughter was clear and moving. Several boys obviously blushed when they looked at me. Blaze looked at me sideways. He felt inexplicably annoyed. He started deliberately making some noise. After making noise for a long time, seeing that I still didn't notice his abnormality, he finally couldn't help shouting, All of you, go away. It's so noisy. The classmates didn't dare to provoke him. They left disappointed like one after another. Only then did I finally turn around and look at him in confusion. He felt a bit guilty. He quickly lay down on the desk and pretended to be asleep. I propped my head on my hand and looked at him. He's such a TS-undery. And he's quite jealous too. The next class was physical education. After completing the practice tasks, it was free activity time. Although it was my first day in this class, everyone was very enthusiastic and invited me to play with them. I naturally readily agreed. They quickly decided on the game to play hide and seek. The selected girl covered her eyes and started counting down. Everyone scattered and hid. I hid in a flower bed. The classmates were found one by one. And I hadn't been discovered. Just as I was feeling proud that I had found a good hiding place, suddenly, I don't know where a basketball came from. It hit me right on the head, without any deviation. It really hurt. I angrily pushed aside the flowers and was about to see who hit me. I secretly opened a hole in the flowers. Looking outside, the person who hit me was actually Blaze. The impulse to run out and have a quarrel disappeared instantly. My eyes rolled around. I couldn't let go of such a good opportunity. So I tried hard to hold back my tears. The moment Blaze pushed aside the flowers and saw me, I covered my head. I looked up at Blaze with tears in my eyes. My eyes were slightly red, and crystal tears rolled down my smooth face. I looked extremely pitiful and wronged. Blaze was obviously stunned for a moment when he saw me. He bent down and pulled me up. He dragged me towards the school infirmary. He walked in front. And I walked behind. I couldn't help but think of the time when we first met. I was still the same as before. I secretly smiled. Back in the class, I took out a mirror and looked at myself. Then I pretended to be surprised and took a flower from my head. It was a beautiful plumeria flower. white with a hint of pink. I turned my head and looked at Blaze beside me. Blaze. Why didn't you remind me that there was a flower on my head? Oh, Ella, I thought you put it on yourself. I leaned closer to Blaze. I blinked my eyes and looked at him. Why did you think so? Is it because I look good wearing this flower? As I spoke, the corners of my mouth curved up. I showed an innocent and expectant smile. The young man's earlobes quickly turned red. So red that they seemed to be about to bleed. But he still tried hard to control his breathing rhythm to make his face look calm. Finally, having fulfilled my absai, he couldn't help it and turned his face to the side and said, "Whatever you think." Looking at Blaze's appearance of trying hard to adjust his breathing, I was already overjoyed in my heart. I kept asking him questions. His earlobes got redder and redder, and the blush had slowly spread to his neck. He stubbornly turned his head and didn't answer me. He bit his lip, as if he had made a great determination. Just as he was about to speak, Sunny, who was sitting in the front seat, couldn't help but turn around. "Classmate. Don't ask him any more. He's just like this. I think that flower looks really good on you." Blaze was obviously stunned for a moment and turned his head without saying anything. I looked up at him. I smiled politely at him. "Really? Thank you." Sunny seemed to be very good at dealing with strangers. He took the lead in the conversation. Slowly, we started chatting. He was very interesting. We didn't stop chatting until the class started. But as soon as the class started, Sunny was called by the teacher to do a problem on the blackboard. To my surprise, he couldn't even do such a simple basic problem. I held my forehead with a bit of a headache. I sighed. I wrote down the answer on the paper. Then I crumpled it up and was about to throw it at Sunny's feet. I called him in a low voice. He turned his head. I gestured to him. And he understood. His eyes instantly lit up, and he nodded repeatedly. Just as I was about to throw it to him, I saw Blaze, who had been wearing a dark face, reach out his hand. He snatched the ball of paper from my hand. "You can't throw it accurately. I'll help you." Before I could answer, Blaze raised his hand. The ball of paper hit Sunny's forehead heavily. He covered his forehead. His mouth opened and closed, as if he was scolding Blaze in a low voice. I couldn't help it. I covered my mouth and snickered. Blaze looked at me unhappily. He frowned. He turned his head and gave Sunny a glare. "Sunny." As soon as the class ended, Sunny turned around again. "Eva. You're literally my savior." We started chatting freely again. The degree to which we got along was astonishing. So much so that we couldn't stop chatting every time we had a break between classes. But what I didn't notice was that Blaze's face beside me was getting darker and darker. Finally, having fulfilled what I had said, it was time to leave school. I went home with Blaze as usual. On the way home, I chattered away to Blaze as I always did. But he ignored me today and kept walking forward with a blank expression. I was puzzled. I was just about to ask him what was wrong. Then a teenager ran up from behind and put his arm around Blaze's shoulder. "I'm going the same way as you guys. Let's go together." It was Sunny. I was overjoyed when he came. The awkward atmosphere just now was finally broken. I started chatting happily with him again. He was very funny and could always make me burst out laughing. So much so that I still had a faint smile on my face when I got home. When I walked into the living room, Blaze grabbed the doll on the sofa and punched it violently. Then he went back to his room in a huff. I was completely confused by his actions. By the time I came to my senses, my stomach hurt from laughing. Goodness! How could he be so cute? The next day when I came to the class, I saw a hairpin placed on my desk. I picked it up and looked at it carefully. It was a very nice hairpin with a plumeria pattern. This is to thank you for your life-saving grace yesterday." Sunny turned around. He said while scratching the back of his head. I quite liked it. So I didn't decline. I thanked him. And then clipped it in my hair. I looked in the mirror and thought it looked pretty good. But Blaze propped his head up with his hand and coldly blurted out, "It's so ugly." Since that day, he began to look for all kinds of opportunities to break this hairpin. Although I had been protecting it very carefully. But in the end, he still broke it. He put his hands in his pockets and said with a bit of guilt in his tone, "Sorry. I accidentally broke it. I raised my eyes. I was just about to take a good look at what kind of act Blaze was putting on this time, when I saw Blaze stretch out his hand. He brushed my somewhat messy hair behind my ear. Then he took out a sunflower hairpin from his pocket and clipped it in my hair. "This is to compensate you." The corners of his mouth lifted slightly, as if he was extremely satisfied. "You look much better wearing this." After saying that, he turned around and quickly stepped into his own room. I took out the hairpin. I gently stroked it with my hand, treating it like a precious treasure. So he was jealous. However, this was the first time he had given me a gift. Naturally, I couldn't bear to wear it. So I carefully put it in a delicate jewelry box and treasured it. Looking at the broken plumeria hairpin on the ground, I hesitated for a moment. But I still picked it up and glued it back together. Because after all, it was a token of Sunny's affection. After gluing it, if you didn't look carefully, you couldn't tell that it had been broken. So I still wore that plumeria hairpin to school the next day. On the way to school, Blaze frowned and looked at me. "Do you like plumeria S so much?" I blurted out without much thinking, "Yes. I like plumeria S the most. But now I like sunflowers the most." "I see." Before I could finish my sentence, he interrupted me and walked forward quickly. I looked at him in confusion. What did he understand? It took me a whole day to finally figure it out. So he was comparing Sunny to a plumeria, indirectly asking me if I liked Sunny. Wait. If I answered him like that, wouldn't Blaze think that I liked Sunny? No. This must be explained clearly. So on the way home from school, I tugged at Blaze's sleeve. Just as he turned his head to look at me, Sunny ran over again and said he wanted to go home with us. I sighed and could only put off the explanation. I walked in the middle as usual. They walked on both sides. But for some reason today, Blaze, who always seemed not to care, suddenly pulled me to his side today. "Don't get too close to him. He smells of sweat after playing ball every day." Blaze's dissatisfied expression was obvious. I got it. He was finally starting to get anxious. Afraid that I would like Sunny. My eyes rolled around. "Actually, it's not bad not to explain." "Well, then I won't explain." From that day on, Blaze began to occasionally say some bad things about Sunny to me. Although I seemed to defend Sunny every time on the surface. But in my heart, I was already laughing with joy. How could he be so cute? One morning, I was having breakfast as usual. My mom came over. She leaned close to my ear and said mysteriously, "Tomorrow is Blaze's birthday." I was a bit caught off guard. When I got to school, I grabbed Sunny and secretly discussed with him how to celebrate Blaze's birthday. We decided to go to the mall to buy a gift after school. In order not to let Blaze notice anything strange, we lied to him. We said that we were going to the library to do group homework. Then we left together mysteriously. We went to the nearest mall and started choosing a birthday gift for Blaze. After thinking about it, I didn't know what gift I should give Blaze. What would he like? Suddenly, my eyes lit up. "You're the one." Soon, I went home holding a delicate gift box. Inside the gift box was a heart-shaped chocolate. There was a crying rabbit printed on it. Under the pattern, there was a sentence printed, "Blaze, I like you. Since I don't know what you like, then I'll give you my heart." I happily went home holding the gift box. Just as I hid the gift box, Blaze came out when he heard the sound. "What did you do with Sunny after school?" There was a bit of panic in his tone. I was so nervous that I stuttered a bit because I was afraid that Blaze would see my gift box. Well, it's nothing really." To relieve the awkwardness, I took the initiative to bring up a topic. But he kept frowning and staring straight at me. After a long time, he finally spoke in a low voice. Do you know what day it is tomorrow?" Why is he asking this? Could it be that he guessed it? Although I was panicking inside, I still looked calm on the face. I tilted my head to show that I didn't know. I clearly saw a flash of disappointment in his beautiful eyes. Then, let out a low sigh. He lowered his eyes, turned around. With a bang, he closed the door heavily. I was a bit panicked. Did I go too far? The next day I got up early. I secretly hid the chocolate gift box. Unexpectedly, when I turned around, I saw Blaze leaning against the door. His eyes were slightly red underneath. And he should have not slept well yesterday. He lowered his eyes and looked at the gift box in my hand. Is it for someone else? I quickly put the gift box behind my back. Yes. It's for Sunny. I saw Blaze obviously freeze for a moment. I also froze for a moment. What am I saying? The meaning of the chocolate is self-evident. I quickly opened my mouth to try to explain. But Blaze grabbed my wrist a bit out of control and pulled me into his room. His hand was gripping very tightly. I felt a bit of pain. Blaze. Wait. You're hurting me. But he seemed not to hear me. Instead, he gripped even tighter. He locked the door and lowered his eyes to look at the girl. His eyes had already become extremely red. Are you going to confess to Sunny? I met his eyes. After brewing for a while, I was just about to open my mouth to explain, when I saw that his eyes had already been soaked with tears at some point. After a long silence, the teenager finally spoke. Don't like him. Okay. He suddenly hugged me tightly and buried his head in my shoulder and neck. Ava, I haven't smoked. And I haven't fought either. Please like me. Okay? His voice was very nasal. He rubbed his head vigorously against the girl's neck. I originally wanted to push him away and explain to him properly. But I felt something warm and wet fall on my shoulder and neck. My movements froze. Was he crying? I sighed helplessly. I hugged him and gently patted his back to soothe him. Don't cry. I don't like Sunny. And I don't want to confess to him either. Only then did he raise his head. His beautiful eyes were red. Then who is your chocolate for? Of course it's for you. I quickly took out the chocolate behind me and handed it to him. He was a bit disbelieving. For me? I nodded. Happy birthday. Blaze. He still couldn't believe it. He let go of his arms around me, lowered his head, and started to open the gift box. He lifted the lid of the gift box. After seeing the few big words clearly printed on the chocolate, he finally believed my words. He looked up at me, his eyes shining brightly, and said with a bit of a crying tone, Then why did you say yesterday that you didn't know it was my birthday? I reached out to wipe away his tears and said with great apology, I was just teasing you. But now you're just like the pattern on it. How could you play such a joke? His voice suddenly rose. Looking at his aggrieved expression, I felt extremely guilty. I lowered my head and gently tugged at the corner of his clothes. Sorry. I won't do it again. Before I could finish speaking, Blaze pinched my neck and kissed me heavily. I didn't even react for a moment. He kissed very forcefully. I could clearly feel the punitive meaning in his kiss. I was almost out of breath from the kiss. I put my hand against his chest, trying to push him away. But he suddenly grabbed my hand, interlocked our fingers, and pressed it against the wall. I really didn't have the strength to resist anymore. I closed my eyes, letting him greedily kiss and suck my lips. Just consider it as the punishment for my lying to him. After a long time, he finally released my lips. He hugged me in his arms, his eyes serious and bright. Baba, Ava. Let's date. After all, I still wanted to tease him. So I smiled and shook my head. It's none of your business. He smiled and glinted at me, and gently pressed the back of my head. Another crazy kiss fell. Finally, heading fulfilled me. I really couldn't hold on anymore. I said intermittently, Blaze. I promise you,